They had already achieved global domination, but in 1966, they decided to risk it all.
They don't have to have nice answers. And if we don't give nice answers, it doesn't mean we're snobby.
Long gone were their days of innocent love songs and relying on their boyish charm, but that was all traded in for backwards guitars, sitars, tape loops, total experimentation, and digging deep into lyrics that covered topics on mortality and ego and enlightenment. This is no longer just pop music that we're dealing with here, but it had evolved into true art. This is the story of how Revolver obliterated expectations and converted the Beatles from global stars into true innovators. Let's take a step back and paint a quick picture of what the world looked like at that time. Rubber Soul had just dropped, and it was mature, emotional, clever, a real turning point for the Beatles in a very prominent way. But there's no sugarcoating it. The Beatles were exhausted, and rightfully so. I mean, between the nonstop touring, the interviews, the cameras, the screaming fans, the bottom line was they didn't know peace anymore. John would later say, "We were fed up with being Beatles," and I gotta admit, that one stings a bit. So in early 1966, instead of jumping into another record-breaking tour or fluffy album, they disappeared into EMI Studios and began experimenting and exploring. This is the beginning of Revolver and how it changed the landscape of music and thought and everything. Just to get you in the headspace of where we're starting here, the first song they recorded was Tomorrow Never Knows. Let's pause on that for a moment. This track sounds like what you might hear if you're in a spaceship drifting through the cosmos. That intergalactic celestial texture was achieved through filtering the voice through a Leslie speaker, the use of drones, loops, backwards guitar solos, and it was inspired by the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Well, that and LSD. John wrote it as a guide for ego death, a song to let your consciousness dissolve. And yes, this was the same band that wrote I Want to Hold Your Hand. Only now they were writing psychedelic spiritual manifestos. No big deal. Paul McCartney, he was diving into avant-garde art. He started experimenting with tape loops. He was cutting up bits and pieces of sound and splicing them together to create these surreal textures. And he brought those tape loops in with him into the studio to record Tomorrow Never Knows. And when George Martin got a hold of them, he stacked them up like making a collage. It was madness and brilliance. This marked an astronomical shift. They weren't writing for the stage anymore. They were composing for the studio. They were tearing up all those old rules and inventing their own. George Harrison, meanwhile, became immersed into the world of Indian music. He soft-launched the sitar on Rubber Soul's Norwegian Wood, but on Revolver, well, he dove headfirst fearless. Love You Too was one of the first pop songs ever built around Indian classical music. No guitars, no drums, just tabla, sitar, and George, exploring new musical and spiritual, of course, frontiers. Hang a sign on me. George later said after Norwegian Wood, I wanted to move further into that music. It was more me than anything I'd ever done before. And Paul? Well, Paul was over there in his orchestra era. Eleanor Rigby was just Paul and his string octet. No Beatles instruments at all. No drums, no guitar, no bass. The lyrics? Loneliness, death, routine. Eleanor Rigby died in the church and was buried along with her name. It was eerily haunting. But it also proved that Paul could write these short stories in song form. Here's a fun fact. George Martin actually was able to utilize some of his classical training with all that string arrangement. And it was actually his idea to make those lyrics so bold and gripping. Revolver was also the album where Paul fully leaned into pop perfectionism. Here, There, and Everywhere, a ballad so tender that even the tough-as-nails critic, John Lennon himself, admitted, "That's one of Paul's best. I love that song." High praise, indeed. Gotta Get You Into My Life was Paul's Motown-inspired tribute to marijuana. Yep, he later confirmed it. It's literally a love song to weed.
Right, I didn't know what I would find there. Got to get you into my life.
And I Will Never Let You Forget for no one. It's melancholy, elegant, has a French horn solo that makes you want to just lie on the floor and contemplate your whole life. And I listen to this song every day, okay? That's just me.
Your day breaks, your mind aches.
And Ringo, don't even get me started. He thrived on Revolver. He was living his best life, and we love to see it. His drumming on She Said, and Rain was untamable. It was just full of flair and feel. And on Yellow Submarine, he stepped into new territory as a cheerful narrator of a psychedelic children's story. Which somebody's got to say it, and I'll step up. I'll be the one to do it. It was the unofficial concept for the Magic School Bus. You're welcome. Pedaling it back to all seriousness, on Yellow Submarine, they used echo chambers and underwater effects and sound effects galore. It was a cartoon, but executed pretty geniusly. The album wasn't all trippy and existential, though. There was still some playfulness there. And Your Bird Can Sing, guitar harmonies so tight, they sound like one instrument. Nobody really knows what that song's about. John said it was just another one of his throwaways, but fans have been analyzing it for years. They know him better than that. Dr. Robert was allegedly about a New York physician who prescribed them vitamin shots, aka amphetamines. When Revolver was finally released in August 1966, it didn't just top the charts, it delivered a universal shockwave. Many critics were breaking their brains trying to figure out how to describe it. Was it rock? Was it classical? Psychedelia? Pop? The one thing everyone could agree on, it was revolutionary. Meanwhile, the world outside the studio was getting complicated. In March, John had given an interview where he made a statement, "We're more popular than Jesus now." That didn't cause much of a stir in the UK, but when it got reprinted in the US, mayhem. Radio stations boycotted them, records were being burned, they received death threats. The 1966 US tour was filled with tension. Security got tighter, the crowds were more unpredictable. The band hated it. And after their final show at San Francisco's Candlestick Park on August 29, 1966, the Beatles quit touring. Yeah, the biggest band in the world walked away from live performances. No more stadiums, no more screaming fans, and they were done trying to out-volume the crowds. From now on, it would be solely, exclusively studio. That's what Revolver really marked. Not just a sonic leap, but a decision, a transformation. The Beatles were no longer performers. They were recording artists. In the end, what did Revolver change? Well, bottom line, everything. It changed how music could sound, what lyrics could say, and it blurred the line between pop and poetry, between song and soundscape. And for the Beatles, it flung open a door they'd never close. Next up, a colorful band, a lonely heart, and an album that would change the face of history again.